Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amy and I am on a financial freedom journey with my family. I share all about that and more on my channel. Today, I want to talk about how to get financially ready for 2025. Now, I know you may be thinking we are already a month into 2025, but I still wanted to share 3 of my tips. I've been thinking about this since the end of 2024 and just like, what are my biggest tips to getting started? And I think I finally nailed down my 3 biggest tips or 3 biggest things that I think that you need to do to get financially ready for this year. So today I'm going to share those tips with you guys, and you may also be asking, why are you qualified to be telling me these 3 tips? Well, my husband and I paid off 6 figures worth of student loans, and since then we have done and finished a lot of our financial goals. We've saved up for cars in cash. We cash flowed our emergency fund, we've been maxing out our Roth IRAs, and we've grown our net worth by hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last few years. So I think I'm qualified a little bit to help you guys, although I am just a regular person. So this is not technically financial advice, but just want to share what has worked for our family over the last few years. So to get financially ready for 2025 or any year that you are watching this, my biggest tip, so tip number 1, is to put your numbers on paper. And it doesn't even have to be physical paper. It could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be anything, it could be a note on your phone. You need to know your numbers. Now, what does that mean? What numbers do you need to know? Well, you need to know incoming income, outgoing expenses. You should know your credit score, all of your debt numbers. There is so many numbers that are related to your finances, and you really need to have a handle on all of those. So one of the biggest steps that I would recommend if you are just starting a financial journey from scratch in 2025, you've never officially done a budget, number 1 would be print. Actually print. If you don't have a printer, go to the library. You can print free or pretty cheap, depending on your library. Print out the last at least 3 months of your bank statements. Any bank that you use. So if you have multiple bank accounts, print them all. If you have credit cards that you're using for spending, print the statements. Print all of it for the last at least 3 months. If you want to go even back farther, go to 6 months, but print the statements. Get a highlighter, highlight all of your expenses. Highlight your fixed expenses, your variable expenses. What are you spending on gas? What are you spending on groceries? What are you spending on dining out? What are you spending on miscellaneous expenses? What are you spending on Amazon or Target? All of those things, whatever categories make sense for you, highlight them, give them a color for the last 3 months minimum. This will drastically help you when you're creating a budget for 2025, because one of the biggest mistakes that I see when people are starting their budgeting journey is that they have no clue what they're spending. They might think, oh, we're probably spending $300 a month on groceries. They're probably actually spending $600. And the reason that I can say that so confidently is because I was that person too. When we first started budgeting, I was like, oh, $250 a month for groceries, we can do that. When we were actually probably spending closer to $700 at the time. You need to know what you're actually spending. And it is okay to want to improve those numbers, but you need to know the reality first. If you're spending $900 a month on groceries right now, going down to $300 is not gonna happen overnight. So maybe your first budget, you go down to $850. Maybe your second budget, you go down to $800. You can make these small changes, but it needs to happen over time. It can't just happen overnight. Another number that you need to know is your other expenses. So fixed expenses, bills, not just your variable spending, but what's your mortgage amount? What is your electric and gas? What are you spending on subscription services? All of those things matter. So anything that is coming out of any of your accounts, you need to know. And this will also help. And some of the reasons, so at least 3 months, but ideally maybe even 6 months, because some of these, you'll be able to catch these like reoccurring expenses that aren't monthly. So if even better if you can go back like 6 months to even 9 months, because you will catch some of those like reoccurring expenses. If you're truly starting from scratch, that'll be the most important thing, is to find those like quarterly or annual subscriptions that maybe you don't even remember that you're paying, because that will also help you to build your budget moving forward. So if you're looking back, 3 months and you say, oh, hey, in October, I have my yearly Canva subscription. You will know then when you're doing October's budget, hey, I need to remember. So personally, what I do for those like periodic expenses, I have a just little note in my phone of every single month I list out, and then under every single month I'll put like, hey, March we have our water bill. October, we have this in November, like just so that I know. And then every month before I do my budget, I'll go back to my note in my phone and I'll say, okay, it is October. What do I have in October that I need to remember? Okay, this, and this. And then also, hey, it's Halloween, so we should probably consider that too. So just so that you have like a reference back point in your budget is really helpful. Another really critical thing to document is your debt. If you have any debt at all, it is critically important that you document it. I have a bunch of printables in my shop, in my Etsy shop. If you guys want to check those out, I have a budget printable, I have a debt printable. All of those would be really helpful if you're like starting from scratch. But debt is very critically important. Write down your interest rate, who do you owe, how often do you have to pay it, what is your monthly payment, all of those things. Write it down so that you know. If you are starting a debt-free journey, that'll be super helpful too, because it'll help you to prioritize depending on what method of debt payoff you want to do. It'll help you prioritize that. And then also when you're doing your monthly budget, you'll have your list of debts right there, and you won't be able to forget about your Capital One card that you have a minimum payment on. So it's really helpful to get all these numbers down on paper. Now, some of the less like critically important ones I would consider would be credit score and net worth. But I do think that those are really important things to know as well. But if you're just getting started, I would focus on the basics, focus on those expenses, income, and debt. But if you do want to get a little bit more advanced, I would also keep track of your credit score. That can be really casual. You can just download an app and keep an eye on it. It's a fun thing to track, especially if you are coming out of maybe a not so great financial situation. It can be really fun to see that increase as you kind of get into a better financial situation. I know personally, my credit score used to be under 600 many years ago at this point, but there was a point in which it was under 600. Now it's well over 830. So it is really incredible, like the progress that you can make when you're on a financial journey. And so it's fun to track that. Now, the other thing would be net worth. I would highly recommend, if you're not tracking net worth, track it today, like do it now, because it's so nice to look back. And I wish that I would have been tracking our net worth way earlier. The earliest net worth tracking I have is starting in 2021. So we did not like officially track our net worth before 2021. So I so wish that I had like those backlogs of like when our net worth was negative, because it was at some points negative in the past. And so I wish that I had like the official log of that. But yes, track your net worth. I actually have a free net worth tracker and goals tracker. I'll link it in the pinned comment if you guys want to check that out. I have a video explaining like how to use it, but definitely check that out. It's completely free, no strings attached, no email, nothing. You can just copy it from Google Sheets, but that's a great place to start. So that's my tip number one. That was kind of long, but it is the most important one. If you are just starting out and you want to get financially ready for 2025 or whatever year it is for you that you're watching this, critically important to know your numbers. You have to know where you're starting, and you have to know what you're doing in order to get a budget or any sort of financial plan moving. And tip number two goes right along with tip number one, and that is creating a budget. And that is creating a realistic budget. Like I said earlier in tip number one, you can create a budget, you can create a completely unrealistic budget. Maybe that's what you would ideally want. You know, obviously all of us would want to spend nothing on eating out or nothing on groceries, but you have to create a realistic budget to what you're spending now. So once you have all your numbers from step one, now is the time to create your budget. Look at your income and look at your expenses. How big is the gap? The gap is where the magic is, okay? And hopefully it's positive, but I've definitely been there where my gap was negative. I was spending more than I was making. But that gap is where all of your power is coming from financially. The bigger your gap in the positive direction, the more financial freedom you are going to have with your budget. So what can we do to increase that gap? Obviously, there's two things you can do. You can increase your income and you can reduce your expenses, or you can do both. So while you're doing your budget, I want you to be thinking in the back of your mind, do I need this subscription? Do I need to be spending this much on eating out? Do I need to be spending this much on DoorDash? Can I cut back here? Can I cut back here? And increase that gap as much as you can. No matter what your financial priorities are, if you're trying to pay off debt, if you are debt free and you're trying to save for retirement, the bigger your gap is, the more freedom you're gonna have with your money. And maybe the gap is so big that you don't really need to cut back on things, and that's totally fine too. But as long as you know what it is, that's going to be the most powerful thing, because you are going to know exactly how much you have every single month to be putting towards your financial goals. Another critical thing to know about making your budget is you need to know when you're getting paid. So you need to be mapping those out. Now, personally, I monthly budget. I share my monthly budget on this channel every single month. If you guys want to go check that out, definitely feel free. I have months and months and years and years of budgets on my channel if you guys want to check those out. But I personally monthly budget, that's what works for me. But it might make more sense for you to paycheck budget or budget in a different way, maybe weekly budget, depending on your situation with your paychecks. Like, it might depend on when you're paid and things like that. Personally, like I said, I monthly budget, so I budget on a calendar month. That is personally what is easiest for me and what makes the most sense to me. And then we are paid bi-weekly, my husband and I, so there are months where we have like an extra paycheck. We usually budget just based on both of us receiving 2 paychecks. So the months when one of us receives 3, we have like extra money, which is really nice. That's like a perk, in my opinion, of monthly budgeting, is that if you are paid bi-weekly, you typically have those months where you're bringing in more income. So that is nice, but the biggest thing is just find what works for you. You have to find what works for you. I can't tell you because I don't know. It's gonna be completely dependent on you. And just like I said, refer back to step 1 the entire time you're doing your budget, because you need to know what you're really spending. If for the last 3 months you've been spending $400 a month on DoorDash, I don't know that you're gonna be able to cut it out cold turkey. Maybe you can, and I'm not saying that you can't. But would it be more realistic to say, okay, we've been spending $400 a month for the last 3 months on DoorDash. This month we're gonna spend $200. Personally, I think that that's way more sustainable than just saying like, we're done, we're not gonna do it. Now, you could do it that way if you want, but I'm just saying more realistically, this is something that you want to implement forever. In my opinion, budgeting will be a part of my life for the rest of my life. So I need it to be something where I have flexibility and sustainability in my budget. I have a lot of other content on my channel about budgeting. If you guys want to check that out, like I said, I post my own personal budget. So if you guys want to go check that out to help, that could definitely be like a starting point. But yes, build your budget, step number 2. And the final step, step number 3, is make some goals. That is a huge priority for you. After you have a hold of your budget, you know what your expenses are, you need to make some goals. These are what are gonna help drive you. What do you want? And you need to know your why first. So why are you doing this? Do you have kids? Do you wanna save for their college? Do you wanna take more vacations with your family? What is important to you? Do you wanna retire early? Do you wanna be able to retire early and help, your aging family? Like, what are your priorities? They're gonna be different for everybody. Personally, for me, I want to prioritize spending time with my family now and in the future. I want to be able to take vacations with my family now. And I also want to be able to retire early. I don't want to have to work until I'm almost 70 years old. I want to be able to enjoy that time with my family, with hopefully, my kids have kids and I get to spend time with their families. But however that looks, I want to have choices when I'm older. I want to be able to decide to retire early if I want to. And I just want to be able to have that flexibility. So that is my why, and why we prioritize saving for vacations and other things in the present, and also saving for retirement for the future. And like I said, a lot of you guys may be in debt, and that might be your priority. So that could be one of your biggest goals. Personally, for us, for many years, paying off debt was one of our biggest goals, but that might look differently for you if you're not in debt. My biggest tip for you to goal plan is, number 1, break it down by like what you want to do in the next couple of years, and then what you want to do in like the next 20, 30 years. Have both. Write them down and then look back at them and say, like, what are our most important? Like, what is critically important to me? What is the most important thing that we could do with our finances this year? If that is saving for vacation, that's fine. If it's paying off debt, that's fine. You just need to have something that's really going to help you drive and help you prioritize budgeting and staying on budget and saving and investing and paying off debt, whatever that is. You need something that's going to drive you. Now, what drives me may not be the same thing. Like, we are all different people, so you need to determine that for yourself. But setting goals is going to help you with that budget. It's going to help you remember that you're doing this for a reason. You're not just doing this because you want to be restricted. You're doing this because you want to take that lifetime trip with your family. Something that is on my list of things that I want to do in the next like 5 years is take like a once in a lifetime trip. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to take a vacation that is like a once in a lifetime trip, going to Europe or Alaska or like just some crazy amazing trip. Like that is a huge thing for me that I would love to do. And that's like in our 5 to 10 year plan, is to take our kids on like a really amazing once in a lifetime trip that they'll remember forever. Because at the end of the day, like your memories are all you have when you are older and you maybe aren't as active or can't do as many things. Like your memories are what you have to look back on. So that's a super important thing for me. So make sure you know your why and set some goals. Those are my 3 biggest tips to get financially ready for 2025. Find out what your expenses are. Write down all your numbers. Write down all your numbers. Create a budget and create some goals. If you can do all 3 of those things, you are going to be in a way better financial position today than you were a month ago. So I hope this helped. Let me know in the comments down below any other advice or tips that you have for somebody who is trying to turn their financial life around in 2025. I would love to hear about them, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye guys.